So we're the last thing between you guys and drinks and dancing, right? Excellent. Fantastic. So I think we got the intros, did we? So I think we want to jump straight into the content here around, you know, enterprise data, tech, customers. What have we learned today? You know, we're in an interesting time where India is still growing. It's in a wonderful position in the market. I think we've all realized that. The rest of the world is not in quite a fine position. So UK, US, UK's in a recession, the rest of Europe's in a recession, America is still deciding. Apparently they're going in next month into a recession. But maybe I'll start with you, Rahul. How are global economic trends going to have a ripple effect on India? You know, what's it going to look? Is it going to drive demand for India, or is it going to have some negative ramifications as well?
So Phil, I'd like to respond to that question, you know, more from a service provider industry. As you know, India has a very large, and all of us represent software services industry. So whenever there is an opportunity in the global marketplace, you know, whether it's a recession or whether there is growth happening, you know, the Indian IT software service industry has shown a lot of resilience to be able to react appropriately to the change. As an example, today, you know, when there are green shoots of recession, I use the word green shoots because, as you mentioned, it may happen tomorrow or day after, we don't know. We notice that our client base, you know, are consolidating. You know, they're looking at optimization, they're looking at cost improvement, and you know, I think the India value proposition, the services industry value proposition, plays quite well. You know, both from cost point of view, productivity point of view, etc. So when such events happen globally, I think it's an opportunity for the industry.
Okay.
And you know, therefore, and earlier we also saw that when there was no recession and there was actually growth happening post-COVID, I think that time as well the industry did well. So I think both sides, you know, we do have capabilities to be able to take advantage. And therefore, you know, we, at least as an industry, feel that that growth will continue. Maybe not at the same percentage growth, but certainly there will be positive growth.
Okay. So overall, you're feeling fairly positive?
I would like to temper it by saying not very positive, but we are positive. You know, I mean, the fact of the matter is that, you know, the global recession essentially means 0% growth in our developed economies, maybe negative growth. Certainly, there will not be situations like that here. So it will be positive, yeah.
Okay. Why don't I get into the financial services sector, Pravina? Hopefully we're going to be able to hear you. But we got you visually up there. So we're talking about these global economic trends. And in general, I think India could be fairly robust with what's happening. But in terms of financial services, how do you think the financial services sector in India is going to respond to what we're seeing in Europe and what we're probably going to see in the US in the coming quarters? I think you're on mute. Hello? Still on mute.
Yeah. It's coming and going.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hi.
We've got you now. We can hear you.
Yeah, you can hear me. Wonderful. Okay. I was kind of getting locked out there. Hi, Phil. Hi, Rahul. Lovely to be here. And yeah, I mean, for an evening session, we've not started off on a very optimistic note, but I think that's where the world is today. I would say that I'm fairly bullish about where we are. We are one of the few markets where we are seeing good growth. The forecasts are positive. I mean, plus 5% for sure. We're debating on whether it is something between 6.5 and 8% growth. I think that's a very good place to be. And the engines of that growth are doing well. And I really look at the financial services, and specifically payments, what's happening in the digital space, all of these to be part of the engines to that growth. And we're seeing growth there, which is really in the double digits.
Right.
So I think that's in a good place.
Okay. And are you seeing, as economic situations may worsen with financial institutions, it can actually drive more business to India in terms of how the sector's operating?
I think we've looked at a lot of activity on the policy side there. Incentive programs, for example, to bring fab manufacturing and semiconductors, hardware into the country, which hasn't been there in the past. And when we look at the sector that drives digitization, or what we call fintech, which is really technology in the financial services space, we keep thinking of it only from a software lens perspective. But actually, there is a very significant hardware component associated with that. And I think that's really what the policy initiatives are trying to drive, to really bring home some of that opportunity. It's not a 0-1 and it's not going to happen overnight, but I do believe it has an opportunity to be a beneficiary there.
Okay. Thank you, Pravina. So our research at HFS, we've seen a lot of evidence that core banking modernization is a real top priority, and it can't slow down just because of economic uncertainty. However, it's not a rip and replace effort, right? So maybe Rahul, what are your customers doing to grapple with this modernization in core banking?
So the world over, if you look at the financial services sector, it has been one of the earliest adapters of technologies. It goes back to 60s and 70s, as you may know. So obviously, the platforms today, which is, let's say, 40, 50 years since they were written, are sufficiently outdated. And therefore, there is an urgency, and especially with the cloud coming in, especially with data becoming very important, and not only data becoming important, but decision-making based on data analytics becoming important as well. So there is a feeling in the industry that our systems are old and outdated and required to be replenished and certainly modernized. But at the same time, because they have been written 30, 40 years back, and they have been, you may call it gradually changed over the years, it is very difficult for large financial institutions, either banks or insurance companies, to replace technology. Right. So core modernization, while very important and necessary, is very difficult and painful. So while our clients want it to happen, they are finding opportunities to kind of do alternatives. For example, we have lots of our clients doing some things called like hollowing the core. Now, what does hollowing the core mean? Hollowing the core means that they leave the core technologies as they are, and then they play on the peripherals and they make peripheral modifications so that they can still get the advantage of a, let's say, customer experience through a better UI and front-end technology rather than replace the whole core. So our clients are working towards, creating layers around core banking, protecting the core banking, but at the same time, creating, as I said, hollowing the core, doing a more connect-based application development, which gets the benefit, at the same time does not change the core. So we are seeing that happening. Complete replacement of core platforms, is a long journey. I don't think the institutions are ready at this point of time for that.
Okay, thanks. And Pravina, do you see a similar trend with the payment modernization efforts?
No, absolutely. I like the word that Rahul used, which is modernization, right? Because the choice is between transformation and modernization. And I think this is the big difference between what are called digitally native financial service organizations and traditional financial service organizations, because there is that legacy technology that one has to deal with, and then you need strategies in terms of how to deal with it. Option one is to really look at this as a separate stack, look at it as a separate stream that works on and focuses on where that agility and scale and flexibility is required, while the rest of the organization moves on a as-is model. and we've seen some of those experiments take place. But I think what we see in the market is more of what Rahul mentioned, which is a way to protect the core and then bring agility on the periphery. So really create the wrappers around the core and have these wrappers work in a very agile manner. And I wouldn't say it succeeds all the time, but that's really the kind of model we are seeing. So one example I can speak about, and that's something that we are very much in the midst of for payments, because with UPI coming in and creating this 8 billion transactions a month, and these transactions were hitting the core banking platform. And these platforms were not designed for that kind of volume when they were created 2-3 decades back. So on one hand, efficiency mechanisms, but more importantly, architecturally, what really the ecosystem along with NPCI has done is to say, how do we get these transactions out of the core and move the transaction itself into the periphery? So we, on UPI Lite, for example, we have a certain feature. The way it works is it looks at all the micro value transactions and handles a mirror ledger in the phone, so that it sort of only syncs up on an intermittent basis and does not really need to create all those entries into the core banking system directly. So it takes a lot of load off the system and creates a much better customer experience. So I think these kind of innovations will come into play to create that kind of hollow the core strategy that Rahul was speaking about.
Okay. And then, let's think a bit more then about, mobilizing the rural sectors, the roadmap for off-the-grid population. And you mentioned UPI 123, but does the National Payment Corporation have an architecture to solve contactless payments for the large unbanked and unserved market?
Yeah, so I think I'll call that digital payments, because contactless has a very physical world connotation to it. And today, probably a very large number of transactions are happening in the online space. So whether it's online or offline, how does one digitize these payments? The vision is to touch a billion people, which I would say is the full adult population of the country.
Right.
And you're probably there, at about 40-50%, which includes a combination of directly digitally empowered along with assisted digitally empowered. And we see that assisted model as something that will help create that deeper penetration and create a journey for people to cross the digital barrier. So digitization itself creates a level playing field, creates opportunities at a micro and a macro level. But having to cross that journey, sometimes it's not as easy, especially for people who may be a little older, people who are not very aware or savvy digitally. They need to go through that assisted model, and we are seeing that work very well. The third axis to this, of course, is to see what we can then do to expand from an international footprint standpoint. And there are a number of actions in play as we speak in terms of connecting bilaterally with certain countries, Singapore, for example, between UPI and PayNow, similar models with UAE and a few other markets, along with handling the entire remittance corridor. So I think recently the Reserve Bank also permitted for Indians living outside the country, so non-resident Indians, to also participate directly in the UPI ecosystem. And also now foreign nationals who come into India as tourists can also get onboarded with a simple KYC and actually start using UPI. So I think there are many streams in play, but the idea is really to make it truly citizen scale for India, and then to expand this into the global scale.
Okay. Thank you, Praveen. Now, we were talking earlier about Digital India, but we're now moving into like an AI generation, right? Do you think, Rahul, that India can make the jump from the digital it's reached to this AI generation that we're moving very fast into?
Yeah, I think we do have the advantage of, so while Pravina spoke a lot about the digitization of India payments and India financial services sector, we must remember here that that we also have a huge footprint globally, right, in terms of the service industry. So that also gives rise to a lot of availability of talent and people, right? So if you look at numbers, like 5 million people are right now engaged in technology and other software-related activities. That's a very large number of people, right? And when you look at new technologies like let's talk about AI, the chat GPT, open APIs, etc. This talent pool of 5 million people, and especially given that the age profile is still the younger age profile, are very skilled at learning new technologies. And we noticed that change happen right during COVID, because when COVID happened, the world over, there was a huge glut of, there was a huge requirement for digital talent. And if you go back to pre-COVID, we may not have had so many people adept at digital talent before COVID. But then during COVID, we were able to repurpose a lot of our employees. We were able to reskill them, specifically firms like ours. We were able to reskill masses of people, right, over a period of 6 to 9 months' time. So what I'm trying to indicate here is that the trainability of the resources is very high. And therefore, as new technologies do come in, whether they are AI or they are any others which may come in, blockchain, etc., our ability to train this 5 million people is very high. Yep. And therefore, as the demand comes from India as a client base for that kind of talent pool, they can certainly dip into the overall large number of people which are there. Because just to give you numbers, I think our industry is like 225 billion. Out of which 170, 180 is exports and 50 is domestic, right? I'm just giving some approximate numbers. So if domestic requires more people talented in new technologies, they can always, kind of borrow from the, large talent pool which is there exporting. Right. And vice versa. Export talent can also benefit from a lot of initiatives taking place domestically, right? So both sides can work. Numbers are very large. Yeah, so.
Okay. And then, I'll ask a similar question to you, Pravina, about the talent shift from, I think, the digital competency we've got to versus what we're seeing down the road. So Rahul's mentioning, large language models, generative AI, these types of. I mean, if you spend some time in the US right now, AI is the topic. It was I was watching a CNN news program, and headlines the other day was, someone was propositioned to buy his own AI. But is this a shift that you think India can make quickly based on the shift it's made in the last 10 years? Or do you think there's more consolidation required just on the bread and butter technology?
No, not really. I think the opportunity for India is to leapfrog. And that's really what we are in the midst of. To add to Rahul's point when he mentioned domestic talent and the talent access, the global talent access that we have, I would add another angle to that, which is really the talent that has moved from services talent to product talent. Yeah. So technology, the industry that really started as a services industry, in the last few years, we're seeing that big trend where we really have product organizations or technology organizations that are getting really good at products. And that really is the first big step. And within products, we then say, how do we deliver these products? And that's where the move towards open source and looking at mechanisms by which you have control, you have agility, you're able to deliver not just at pace, but also in a highly cost-effective manner. All of those kick in. And I think we've started seeing AI models creep in slowly over the last three to 4 years at least. I mean, simple chatbots and small things like that, risk modeling. These would be some of the favorite areas where I think AI is already being used. And now this is really going to exponentially grow. I think we're seeing that. We're seeing the interest with very fresh talent coming in, people getting reskilled from an AI perspective. And a lot of folks in the technology industry with, after the whole chat GPT discussions, really taking it onto themselves to say they need to be prepared for this new world now. Even from NPCI, we truly believe that we need to be an AI organization. It's not good enough now for us to be a technology organization. And we've started this journey 2 years back in terms of not just creating an innovation lab, which does work on AI, but slowly starting to say, how do you bring AI the entire organization? And I think a number of organizations are in that space as we speak. So we are going to see this to some extent in the next 3 to 4 years leapfrog in India, I think.
I think I'd like to add one more data point here. If you look at the startup ecosystem in the country, that is also a reflection of, because one would presume that so many people in startup, they're not in the services sector, right? They're starting their own companies, they're creating products. So like almost like a 75 to 80,000 startups and, maximum number of unicorns, like almost 100 unicorns in the country. So that also indicates that, look, how you have been able to repurpose the talent pool. The talent pool, which would have hitherto been a services talent pool, has been repurposed, to be a product-led, innovative-led talent pool. Yeah. So
it's very interesting, like repurpose the talent pool, because when we look at the evolution of technologies and over the years, companies like Xerox were unable to evolve their talent beyond copiers to documents. We saw PC companies unable to take their talent beyond hardware services to where we are today. When we look at our service providers who are offering bread and butter technology, BPM services, can they really evolve the talent? We were hearing earlier that the services industry is the number 5 choice of graduates now. So they want to go to startups, they want to go to work for Google, they want to work for Microsoft, they want to work in consumer goods retail, right? So what can the services industry do to evolve the value proposition beyond what we have today? Maybe get...
So it's a very, very relevant question. So I spoke earlier about talent pool as a country, right? Now let's talk about talent pool as a services industry. I think our services industry is becoming extremely relevant and very critical because the volumes of work that we do for our clients today is not small. We have in good firms, you'll have like 15-20% of the IT spend, perhaps comes to Indian firms, including our firm. So when you become so relevant in terms of technology, so you no longer are just doing services for that firm. You are doing very upper end, high value added work for most of the clients that you're servicing.
Right.
And it's no longer a fledgling small percentage of work. You are a part of significant volumes and value chains. I can give you some examples in my company. For example, we are redeveloping payment platforms for some of our global clients. Okay, so it's just not that we are servicing; we are actually developing the product for them, as an example, right? So, and I'm sure there may be other companies doing similar kind of high value work. So because the industry has become so important in the value chain of technology for our customers, we are seeing higher value work come in. And so we may be still a services company by our business model, but the work we do is extremely innovative and extremely front-facing. So I think that pivot should be something which we should be able to do quite nicely.
Okay, thank you. What's your view then, Pravina, on you've got a lot of involvement in Digital India. Are we going to be calling this Digital India in a year's time and 2 years' time, or is this going to become a different conversation, do you think?
I think the conversation on Digital India, with all its complexities and scale and many more problems to be solved, is a conversation that will continue to be there. But it will take different avatars, because we know that initial avatar was about giving identity. The second avatar was about UPI, which is creating the payment infrastructure. And the objective then was to say, if we get efficient payments right, we believe we can add up to 1% of the GDP through the power it creates for businesses to run on efficient payments. And now we've got credit, which comes on the back of high quality payment data and the need to really create penetration of credit in the economy. And we still have a long way to go. If you look at India, credit card penetration is single digit, probably amongst the lowest in the world. So there is a lot more to do around, credit and how that can work powered by digital rails. We have the ONDC initiative that's just come out, which is around commerce and how do we create the commerce platform. And the India stack is also about, the health stack and the education stack. And so I think it's a journey, and we're somewhere just in the midst of that right now.
Yeah. Well, it's 7 p.m. nearly, and it's dinner time, I think, for many, and dancing and drinks, right? So I'm going to have one last quick question. I'll start with you, Rahul. If you could change one thing about India to be more successful than ever with its technology services, what would you do? One thing.
One thing.
Yeah.
I would like to have our industry price more for value. Because I think this is the most undersold part of our business that we do. We create so much value for our clients. Our ability to be able to extract part of that value and retain it in the services companies. I think the one thing, if I can change that, I would change that.
Okay. So Pravina, you had about 1 minute to think of that one. What one thing you can change to make India's technology industry even better, more successful than it could be?
I think I'll go back to the biggest opportunity and the biggest challenge, which is talent.
Right.
So, how do we really attract, reskill, repurpose, and create the best-in-class talent will be very critical for us to get to the scale of opportunity we are referencing here.
Yeah. So a country of, 1.8 billion? We have 5 million in tech, so there's a lot more room for opportunity and growth here, I think. Good. Well, look, I don't want to keep you guys any longer, and I've enjoyed meeting many of you here. Hopefully I'll see some of you more this evening as well. But Pravina and Rahul, thank you very much. Great to chat. And
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Rahul. Thank you, Pravina.
For more interesting content, like, comment and subscribe to our NASScom YouTube channel.